She was sitting in my chair. Not metaphorically. Not in some abstract professional sense. Literally sitting in the chair behind the desk that had my name card on it, the one I had seen in the welcome photograph HR sent me the Friday before my start date, the desk I had mentally arranged and rearranged a dozen times during the 2 weeks between accepting the offer and walking through those doors. Sitting in my chair. Laughing at something on her phone. Completely at home. And when she looked up and saw me standing in the doorway of what was supposed to be my office, the laughter didn't stop immediately. It took about 2 seconds. 2 full seconds where she processed what she was seeing, where recognition moved across her face like weather, where the laugh died and something else replaced it, something I can only describe as the expression of a person who has been caught but is already calculating how to reframe being caught as something else entirely. "Sloane," she said. "Petra," I said. And just like that, 14 months after she destroyed my wedding, we were in the same room again. I want to tell you the full story. I want to tell you all of it because the beginning matters as much as this moment, and because the ending, which I promise you is coming, is the kind of thing that only makes sense if you understand exactly how we got here. My name is Sloane Merritt. I am 34 years old. I am a brand strategist, which means I spend my professional life understanding how organizations want to be perceived and then building the architecture that makes that perception real. I am good at it. I have been good at it since my first internship at 22, when my supervisor told me I had an unusual instinct for the gap between what companies said and what they meant, and that instinct was worth developing. I develop it. Every year, in every role, I get better at reading the distance between the story someone tells and the truth underneath it. It is one of the great ironies of my life that it took me 8 years to read Petra Madsen correctly. I met Petra at 23. We were both entry-level at the same marketing agency in Philadelphia, Holloway Brand Group, midsize, good clients, the kind of place where ambitious young women either formed alliances or cut each other's throats. Petra and I formed an alliance. Or I thought we did. She was funny. Sharp. The kind of friend who says the thing everyone else is thinking and makes you feel sophisticated for laughing at it. She remembered details, your coffee order, the name of your difficult client, the anniversary of your bad breakup, in the specific way that makes you feel seen, though I understand now that kind of memory is sometimes less about caring and more about collecting. We were close for 8 years. Through job changes and apartment moves and relationships that worked and relationships that didn't. She was there when my father had his surgery. I was there when her mother passed. We shared the kind of history that makes you trust someone not because you've evaluated them carefully but because so much of your life has happened in their presence that their presence feels synonymous with safety. When I met Garrett, she was the first person I called. When Garrett proposed, she was the first person I told. When I started planning the wedding, asking her to be my maid of honor felt less like a decision and more like a fact of nature. Of course it was Petra. Who else would it be? I should have asked that question more carefully. Garrett Merritt is a good man. I want to say that clearly because what happened at our wedding was not about him, and I don't want to tell this story in a way that casts a shadow on something that doesn't deserve one. He is steady and kind and has never once in 4 years of marriage made me feel like the least important person in the room. He is, as my grandmother observed upon meeting him for the first time, a keeper. We got engaged on a Thursday evening in October. He made dinner, badly, enthusiastically, in the way he approaches anything he cares about, and asked me in our kitchen between the pasta and the wine, and I said yes before he finished the sentence. The wedding was planned for the following September. 14 months of planning. I am a brand strategist. I approach large projects with structure and intention and a clear sense of what I want the experience to feel like. The wedding was no different. I knew what I wanted, something warm and specific and genuinely us, not a performance of a wedding but an actual day. Petra was involved in every decision. That was my choice and I made it freely. She was my maid of honor. Her involvement felt appropriate, natural, wanted. Looking back I can see the moments. The small redirections. The way she'd suggest changes to things I'd already decided, framed as improvements. The way she'd offer opinions on Garrett that were technically supportive but carried a frequency I didn't tune into correctly. Little things. Individually meaningless. Collectively, in retrospect, a pattern. But I didn't see the pattern. Because she was Petra. Because I trusted her. Because 8 years of friendship had convinced me that what I was seeing was what was there. I was wrong. The wedding was on a Saturday in September. Venue was a restored farmhouse outside Philadelphia, string lights and wooden tables and a caterer who did an extraordinary lamb that I still think about sometimes. 87 guests. My mother cried during the ceremony. Garrett's father gave a toast that was too long and completely perfect. Everything was right until it wasn't. The first sign was subtle enough that I didn't register it in real time. During the cocktail hour, Petra was talking to Garrett. That wasn't unusual, she'd always been friendly with him, and cocktail hours are social occasions, and I was moving through the room greeting people and not watching any single conversation closely. But one of my cousins mentioned it afterward. Mentioned the way Petra had her hand on Garrett's arm. The length of the conversation. The way she was leaning in. My cousin filed it under funny and mentioned it lightly, and I smiled and moved on. The speech was where everything became undeniable. Maid of honor speeches are supposed to be about the bride. Occasionally they're about the couple. Sometimes, if done well, they're about the friendship between the maid of honor and the bride, the history, the love, the meaning of being chosen. Petra's speech was about Petra. Not obviously. She's too clever for obvious. It was structured correctly, she mentioned me, mentioned Garrett, mentioned the wedding, but the emotional center of it was herself. Her version of our friendship. Stories that were technically about me but somehow always returned to her perspective, her role, her significance. And woven through all of it, with a subtlety that I think most of the room missed but that landed on me like cold water, were implications about Garrett. Nothing direct. Nothing you could point to and say, that is a specific accusation. Just the architecture of doubt. The well-placed question dressed up as a compliment. The observation about Garrett's spontaneous nature that sat oddly next to a comment about how I'd always needed stability. The anecdote about a night out from 3 years ago that had nothing to do with the wedding and everything to do with establishing a version of events I didn't recognize. By the end of the speech the room was applauding, because it sounded like a maid of honor speech, and Garrett was looking at me with an expression of genuine confusion, and I was holding my champagne glass and smiling in the automatic way you smile when you are in public and something has just gone very wrong and you don't yet know the full dimensions of it. The full dimensions became clear over the following week. 2 guests, separately, uncomfortably, mentioned to mutual friends that they'd come away from the speech wondering about Garrett. 3 separate people texted me variations of, Petra's speech was, something. My mother, who had been graciously silent for 3 days, finally said what she thought, which was that Petra had spent 15 minutes at my wedding making it about herself and making my husband look questionable in front of everyone we loved. And Garrett, my husband, my person, the man I had just married, told me that during the cocktail hour, Petra had said something to him directly. Quietly. Framed as concern for me. Something about whether he was sure he was ready for this. Whether he understood what he was committing to. Whether Sloane knew about a situation from 2 years ago that she might want to know about before she made any permanent decisions. There was no situation from 2 years ago. There was nothing to know. It was manufactured concern, weaponized as a seed, planted in the middle of my wedding day with the specific intent of making my husband doubt himself and making me doubt my husband. I called Petra. She answered on the 3rd ring with the voice of someone who had been waiting for the call and had prepared for it. She said she was only trying to help. That she cared about me. That she had some concerns she felt I deserved to know. That a real friend tells you the hard things. That she was sorry if the timing was wrong but her intentions were good. I listened to all of it. Then I said, "Don't contact me again." And I hung up. The silence that followed was one of the cleaner things I have ever done. Petra called twice more. I didn't answer. She sent a message, long, carefully worded, another performance of wounded friendship, that I read once and archived. She reached out through two mutual friends, both of whom told me what she'd asked them to relay and then said, in their own ways, that they understood if I was done. I was done. Here's what I did not do. I did not spend the months after my wedding consumed by Petra Madsen. I had a marriage to build and a career to grow and a life to live, and none of those things had space in them for someone who had demonstrated so clearly who they were. What I did do was work. I had spent 5 years at Holloway after Petra and I both left for separate opportunities. I'd moved to a senior strategist role at a firm called Calder Group, boutique but well-regarded, the kind of place where good work got noticed because there was nowhere to hide behind scale. I was good there. I got better. I built a track record that felt genuinely mine, not built on proximity to someone else's success but on what I could do specifically. After 2 years at Calder I was recruited. Vantage Brand Partners. One of the top 15 brand strategy firms in the country. Offices in 4 cities. A client roster that included names I'd been studying since business school. A director of brand strategy role that was exactly, specifically, the job I had been building toward. The offer came in March. I accepted in March. I spent 2 weeks doing the mental work of preparation, reading everything I could find about the firm's recent work, the clients I'd be inheriting, the team I'd be leading, the culture I'd be entering. The welcome email from HR came with a photograph of my office. I mentally arranged and rearranged that desk approximately 11 times over 2 weeks. And on a Monday morning in April, I walked through the doors of Vantage Brand Partners and found Petra Madsen sitting in my chair. I want to pause here and ask you something. Have you ever had a moment where the universe presented you with information so absurd, so cosmically on the nose, that your first response was not anger or shock but a kind of incredulous, almost scientific curiosity? Like, what are the odds? What is actually happening right now? Is this a test, ? That was my first 3 seconds. Then my professional brain came online. Because here is what I understood immediately, standing in that doorway, whatever this situation was, however Petra had come to be in this building, I was the director of brand strategy at Vantage Brand Partners. My name was on the door placard. My offer letter was in my bag. My start date was today and it was not a surprise to anyone in this building except apparently to Petra, whose expression had moved from startled to calculated in the span of 2 seconds. I was the director. She was something else. Something I needed to understand before I said anything at all. I stepped into the room. I wasn't expecting you, I said. Which was profoundly true. I work here, she said. I've been here for 4 months. 4 months. She'd been at Vantage for 4 months. While I was being recruited, while the offer was being negotiated, while I was reading everything I could find about this firm's culture and clients and team, she had been here. In this building. 4 months. What's your role? I asked. Something moved across her face. Something she controlled quickly but not quite quickly enough. Senior strategist, she said. Brand team. My brand team. She was a senior strategist on my brand team. I nodded. I kept my face completely professional. I said, we should probably let HR know I've arrived. I set my bag down on the desk, my desk, and I walked back out to find my contact in human resources. My heart was beating faster than I would have liked. I noted that and set it aside. There would be time for feelings later. Right now there was a situation to understand. The HR director was a woman named Constance Wong, 40-something, efficient, the kind of person who keeps a clean desk not from habit but from philosophy. She welcomed me warmly, walked me through the standard first day orientation, handed me a folder of onboarding materials. About 20 minutes in, I said, I noticed Petra Madsen is on my team. Constance's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. Yes. She joined us in December. Senior strategist. We have a prior relationship, I said. Personal, not professional. I want to flag it as a matter of transparency. Constance looked at me. What kind of prior relationship? She was my maid of honor 14 months ago. The relationship ended badly. I kept my voice level. I don't anticipate it being an issue professionally, but I wanted it on record that I disclosed it immediately. Constance nodded slowly. I appreciate you telling me. Did she know you were coming? Based on her reaction this morning, I don't believe so. She wasn't involved in your recruitment process, Constance said. Different teams handle different tracks. A pause. Is there anything you need from us to manage this situation? Not at the moment, I said. I just wanted it documented. Constance made a note. Consider it documented. I thanked her. Went back to my office. Closed the door. Sat in my chair. Breathed. Then I opened my laptop and got to work, because I was the director of brand strategy at Vantage Brand Partners and I had a team to understand and clients to review and a first week to execute, and none of that was going to wait for me to finish processing the particular strangeness of what the universe had arranged. Before I go any further, if this story is doing something to your pulse right now, you are in good company. Hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I see every single one. Now let's keep going, because it gets better. There are people who would have handled the Petra situation by ignoring it, by walking in with professional authority and simply performing like she wasn't there and hoping the discomfort resolved itself. There are people who would have handled it by confronting it immediately, dramatically, in a way that made the history between them the most visible thing in the room. I did neither. I handled it the way I handle brand strategy. I assessed the landscape. I identified the stakeholders. I mapped the existing relationships. I understood what each person on my team needed and what they had and where the gaps were. And I treated Petra Madsen exactly the way I treated every other member of my team, professionally, specifically, with clear expectations and genuine respect for the quality of her work. Because here is the thing about Petra that I had never let myself fully acknowledge in 8 years of friendship: she was talented. Actually talented. Her strategic instincts were good. Her client relationships were solid. Her work advantage in the 4 months before I arrived had been well regarded. I read her performance notes. They were positive. I read her project files. The thinking was sound. I did not let our history determine my professional assessment of her. That would have been both unfair and bad leadership, and I was not willing to be either. I met with each member of my team individually in my first week. Standard onboarding practice, essential for a new director. When I met with Petra, I was prepared. She came into my office with the careful composure of someone who had been rehearsing. She sat across from me with her hands folded and her expression set to professional neutral, and I could see the slight tension in her jaw that meant she was working harder at the neutral than it looked. I ran the meeting exactly as I had run every other one-on-one that week. I asked about her current projects. Her client relationships. Where she felt strongest and where she wanted to grow. What she needed from me as a director. What she thought the team needed that it wasn't currently getting. She answered every question carefully and well. At the end of the meeting I said, I want to acknowledge that this is a strange situation. I think you know why I'm saying that. She looked at me. I do. I'm not going to let our personal history affect how I work with you professionally. I want to be direct about that. What I need from you is the same thing I need from everyone on this team: good work, honest communication, and the willingness to flag problems before they become crises. A pause. Can you do that? I asked. Yes, she said. Good. I stood. Extended my hand. Then let's move forward. She shook it. She left. I sat back down and stared at the wall for approximately 90 seconds. Then I moved forward. The first 2 months were professionally clean and personally strange in the specific way of things that require you to hold 2 truths simultaneously: that you can behave well towards someone who hurt you, and that behaving well doesn't require pretending the hurt didn't happen. Petra did her job. She did it well. I gave her feedback directly and honestly. I credited her work when it deserved credit. I corrected her when correction was warranted, the same way I corrected everyone. The team, 8 people, a good mix of experience levels, was watching us. Not obviously. But I'm a brand strategist. Reading the room is the job. I could feel them calibrating, figuring out the dynamic, deciding what it meant. I decided what it meant by being consistent. Consistent with Petra. Consistent with everyone. Week after week, meeting after meeting, project after project. Something started shifting around the 6-week mark. Petra began coming to me with things she didn't have to bring to me. A client relationship question she could have navigated herself. A strategic decision well within her authority. An observation about a competitor campaign that she wanted to talk through. She was, I realized, testing something. Whether I was trustworthy. Whether my professional consistency was real or performed. Whether the director who treated her fairly despite having every reason not to was going to remain that director or eventually reveal something else underneath. I remained that director. Not because I had forgiven everything. I hadn't, not fully. But because the professional context was the professional context, and my job was to lead a team well, and Petra Madsen's presence on that team was a fact I had not chosen but was responsible for navigating. 8 weeks in, she knocked on my office door on a Thursday afternoon. "Do you have 10 minutes?" she asked. "Sit down," I said. She sat. Folded her hands. Unfolded them. Looked at me with an expression I'd never seen on her before, something unguarded and uncomfortable and not at all calculated. "I've been thinking," she said, "about the wedding." I waited. "I've been thinking about it since you walked in on the first day. Probably before that, honestly. But especially since." She stopped. Started again. What I did was wrong. The speech. The thing I said to Garrett. All of it. A pause. I told myself a story about it for a long time. That I was looking out for you. That I had concerns I needed to raise. That a real friend does the hard thing. She stopped. But I know what it actually was. What was it? I asked. My voice was level. I genuinely wanted to hear her say it. I was in love with Garrett, she said. I had been for a long time. I didn't deal with it honestly, with you or with myself. And when you were about to marry him I tried to break it up. I dressed it up as concern but that's what it was. I tried to break up your wedding because I wanted something I was never going to have and I took it out on you. The room was very quiet. I'm not asking you to forgive me, she said. I'm not saying this because I want something from you. I'm saying it because I've been working with you for 8 weeks and you've been fair to me in a way I didn't deserve and it's been making it impossible to pretend I don't know the difference between what I did and what you're doing. She looked at me directly. You're a better person than I was to you, she said. I thought you should know I know that. I sat with that for a long moment. Then I said, I appreciate you telling me. She nodded. Started to stand. Petra. She stopped. The work you did on the Callaway account this week was excellent. The insight about the secondary audience was exactly right. She blinked. Thank you. I'll see you at the team meeting tomorrow. She left. I sat alone in my office and understood something I hadn't fully let myself see, that the thing I had been most afraid of when I walked through that door on my first day, that Petra's presence would corrupt everything, would make the job about her, would reduce my professional life to an extension of a personal wound, had not happened. Because I hadn't let it. And because, in some way I hadn't anticipated, she hadn't let it either. I want to tell you what the job became. Vantage Brand Partners was everything I'd hoped it would be in the specific, unromantic way that the best professional experiences tend to be, not glamorous or cinematic, just deeply engaging work done at a high level with people who were good at what they did and cared about doing it well. The clients were interesting. The problems were real. The team was talented. Within my first quarter, I had restructured the workflow for 2 major accounts, implemented a feedback system that genuinely improved collaboration, and led a brand repositioning for a healthcare client that the managing partners described as the strongest strategic work the division had produced in 3 years. I'm not telling you that to perform modesty about it. I'm telling you because it matters. Because the job was mine and I did it, and no part of it was defined by Petra Madsen's presence on my team. That's the thing about doing the work. It crowds out the other narratives. At the end of my second quarter, I was asked to take on an additional portfolio, 2 clients from a division that was being restructured. It was a significant expansion of scope. I said yes. Petra was one of the 2 leads I designated to support the expanded portfolio. She was the right choice. The work was the work and she was good at it, and that was the only calculus that applied. She did not say anything about it directly. But there was a meeting, a big pitch, one of the most important the team had worked on, where she presented a section of strategic analysis that I can only describe as the best work I'd seen her do. After the meeting, she stopped by my office. "That section landed," she said. "It did," I agreed. "The competitive mapping especially." She nodded. She started to leave. "Petra." She turned. "Good work today." She looked at me for a moment with that same unguarded expression. "Thank you," she said. She left. I turned back to my desk and thought, this is what it looks like when people rise to the environment around them. 6 months in. A Friday afternoon. The managing partner, a man named William Ashby, 62, 3 decades in brand strategy, the kind of professional gravitas that has nothing to prove and therefore proves everything, called me into his office. He told me the director of brand strategy role was being elevated. The firm was growing. They wanted to create a VP-level position to oversee the entire brand practice across all 4 offices. He asked if I was interested. I said yes before I finished processing the question. He smiled. Said the formal process would begin after the holiday. Said he wanted me to know I was the leading candidate. Said the work I'd done in 6 months had exceeded what they'd hoped. I walked back to my office in a state of professional joy that I allowed myself to feel completely and without qualification, which is something I've had to learn. Good things deserve to be felt fully. I called Garrett. He said, "I knew it. I knew it when you got the offer." He sounded like himself, quiet, steady, genuinely happy for me. "Come home and let me make dinner." "You're going to burn something," I said. "Almost certainly," he agreed. I went home. He burned the garlic bread but not the pasta. We sat at our kitchen table with wine and the slightly smoky scent of overcooked bread, and I told him everything about the 6 months, not just the VP news but all of it, including Petra's conversation in my office, including what it had been like to lead her, including what I'd learned about myself in the process. He listened the way he always listens, completely, without rushing to respond. "Are you okay?" he asked when I finished. "I'm more than okay," I said. I think I'm proud of myself." "You should be," he said. "It's a strange thing," I said. "The worst thing she did, the wedding, it sent me into the 2 most productive years of my professional life. I just put my head down and worked. And the work compounded. What she meant as damage became fuel," Garrett said. "Exactly." He refilled my glass. "What happens to her now? With the promotion?" I thought about it. "She stays on the team," I said. "Good work is good work. She'll report to whoever fills the director role." A pause. "She's capable of more than she's done with herself. Whether she gets there is up to her." He nodded. "You're decent," he said. "I'm strategic," I said. "Those aren't mutually exclusive," he said. He's right. They aren't. The VP promotion was formalized in January. Director of Brand Strategy became Vice President of Brand Practice, a title that would have seemed impossible to the 23-year-old who started at Holloway Brand Group with Petra Madsen in adjacent cubicles, both of them ambitious and hungry and not yet knowing what shape their paths would take. On the day the announcement went to the firm, I got 12 messages from colleagues, 3 from clients, 1 from Constance in HR with a warm note and a scheduling request for updated paperwork. And 1 from Petra. A single line, *congratulations. Well earned, *. I read it. Thought about it. Wrote back, *thank you. Good work on the Hendrix deck this week, *. Professional. Direct. Consistent. That's the thing about being who you are regardless of the circumstances. Eventually the circumstances stop mattering as much as the who. I want to tell you what I know now that I didn't know when this started. I know that betrayal from someone you love is a specific kind of information. It tells you who they were when you weren't watching carefully. And once you have that information, you can decide what to do with it. You can let it define everything, or you can use it to calibrate better going forward and then set it down. I know that professional success is the most effective non-response to people who try to diminish you. Not as revenge. As evidence. Evidence that the story they told about you, the one where you were naive, where you were manipulable, where you needed to be undermined, was always fiction. I know that leading someone who hurt you is one of the harder tests of professional character, and that passing it feels different from the inside than it looks from the outside. From the outside it looks like decency. From the inside it feels like work, the slow, daily work of holding your standards higher than your grievance. And I know that Garrett burning the garlic bread is one of the most comforting constants in my life, and that I should tell him that more often. My name is Sloan Merritt. I am 34 years old. I am the Vice President of Brand Practice at Vantage Brand Partners. I have a husband who listens completely and a career that is genuinely mine, built year by year on what I could actually do. On my first day, I walked into my office and found the woman who ruined my wedding sitting in my chair. I set my bag down on my desk. And I got to work. That's all it ever was. That's all it ever needed to be. Thank you for being here. If this story landed somewhere real for you, if it gave you something to hold on to about your own path, your own work, your own version of walking into a room and finding something you didn't expect, then I'm glad you stayed. More stories are on your screen right now. Click one. I'll meet you there.